Okay, everybody. Hello and welcome to How I Learned to Love Fantasy podcast. I am Travis Oates.
And I'm Dan Billet.
And we are your hosts. This is a show in which we examine the fantasy things of our past and how it helped to the fantasy things.
Fantasy things. Fantasy.
Yeah.
Let's not look too closely into the fantasies of our past, but the things that shaped us as far as like TV, comic books. That's something we didn't talk about.
Comic books.
Like,
comic books is technically books. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's true. So TV books, comic books, movies that really shaped the way that we have come to love the fantasy genre.
Yeah.
Genre.
And today we are going to talk about something that when we try to figure out what we're going to, what subject we're going to, both of us were like, oh yeah,
Yes,
that had a
please.
huge effect on our childhoods. And that is, of course,
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's...
The Adventures of Superman.
That's correct. It's The Adventures of
Yes.
Superman.
And this is the old Adventures of Superman.
Old.
This is the old school one.
Older than us, even.
Yes,
Like,
I mean quite a bit older
significantly.
than us.
Yeah.
Yes. In the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And this all the way back then. And now I watched, so in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
we only had, at least when I was a child, a
Yeah.
little kid, we only had 3 channels.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize that you had that many. I thought.
No, we had 3, but
channels.
it gets worse because 2 of those channels were PBS and CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting
version of
Company.
PBS, right?
So, which had nothing that I could care less of on either of those.
Right.
And that comes from somebody who was on CBC on television. Couldn't care less.
Yeah.
However, we did have NBC.
Right.
And I believe the CBC, this is the one thing that CBC was good for. The CBC affiliate that we had
Okay.
showed syndicated shows during, just after school, probably between the 2 and 5 hour.
Well, this was the magic of. That's how I came to know the show. Also,
Sure.
was the magic of afternoon television was entirely syndication. So it was this. Right before this here in LA was Mighty Mouse.
Okay.
The also very, very old cartoons of Mighty Mouse.
Yes, basically just Superman in mouse form.
Yeah, exactly, Super Mouse. And then followed by Superman, and I loved them. Like I loved them so much. George Reeves as Superman. Reeves as Superman was the Superman for me growing up. Even though Christopher Reeve also was amazing.
So Christopher Reeve.
Yes,
I've heard people argue about this.
No.
And do it in the opposite. It was Christopher Reeve, George Reeves.
Yes.
Yes.
I made that mistake a little.
Yes, it drives me nuts when
Yeah.
people do that.
Yeah, when Christopher Reeves, no, sorry.
George Reeves.
Yes, Christopher Reeve.
Yes. Don't do that. Triggers me.
Yeah, no, George Reeves was very good.
Yeah, he was, for the longest time, maybe even still today, honestly, if I was to just immediately close my eyes and think of Superman,
Mm-hmm.
I think George Reeves would still be the Superman I picture in my head.
Yeah.
I really do. I can't properly say how much that show shaped my love of superheroes in particular.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people, you ask, who's your favorite superhero? And a lot of people will pick Batman. A lot of people will pick Wolverine. A lot of people will pick cooler superheroes.
Yes.
My favorite superhero was and still is and probably always will be Superman. And there's something about Superman that transcends regular comic bookdom. I don't know how to explain it. He's like Santa Claus for me. Like he's something that is transcendent, I guess. He represents for me good, like to a certain extent. He represents to me like what superheroes are at their core. You know, that there's someone who has all this power and has chosen with this great power to take on great responsibility.
Sure. Yeah.
And do good.
And without an Uncle Ben to tell
Yeah.
him to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, although I guess he had a dad.
Yeah. Although, you know, and his much like Spider-Man and a lot of these others, in fact, if you watch, so in preparation for this, we watched a few of the episodes.
Yeah.
I watched the pilot from the first season. I watched, and then I watched an episode from every season after that to just kind of see how the show progressed.
Can I ask real quick?
Sure.
Did you come to this show in color or in black and white? Because
I think I came to it, but I mean, it's very hard for me to I think it was black and white.
See, I had no idea that there were. I mean, that's not entirely true. I knew that there were black and white because the episode that I remember the most was in black and white.
Sure,
but I guess I had forgotten that, and I sort of associated with the earlier serials being in black and white because it was always in color. They almost never showed the black and white.
It would make sense. The only black and white episodes of the first two seasons.
Right.
So only the first two seasons were shot in black and white. Everything after that was shot in color. They also may have colorized.
Oh yeah.
The first two seasons there was a big Ted Turner in particular
in the 80s was really big on that.
Was just trying to color everything.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe I will say the most kid friendly episodes were the ones after the color came.
Yeah, for sure.
Came in,
yeah. No, but that was what because I think largely because people wouldn't watch a black and white. We had sort of moved to the point where
I'm trying to think because my Mighty Mouse was Rocket Man. So before Superman was an old show called Rocket Man, and he had a bullet-shaped helmet, and he had jetpack on his back, and it was very simple. I mean, just he could fly places, and it was very like George Lucas-esque, like old serials. Where I mean, I think he had a gun.
Right.
I think that's the show that the Rocket Man movie was based off of. And I know Rocket Man was in black and white.
Right. Okay.
But so I feel like that block was in black and white,
right.
but I'm sure there were more color Superman. I mean, they had to be. If they were running it in syndication, there would have been way more episodes that were in color.
Yeah,
but in my brain, he's in black and white.
I really only remember it being in color, except again for the most memorable episode, which I'm sure I will talk about.
Brett in the booth here.
Hi, Brett in the booth.
I think wasn't Rocket Man's thing faster than a speeding bullet? Also shoots people with bullets.
Yes,
right.
I believe
Is
so.
that what his?
Yeah. And I think he was. I'd have to go back and look at the original thing because I know he fought bad guys, but he also might have been fighting Nazis. I don't remember.
Right.
You gotta.
Yeah.
I have one question for you, and I don't know if this would get you off on a tangent or something, but I've heard rumblings of people saying we're tired of the boy next door Superman, and that a lot of people want kind of a darker thing, and then we've seen it a little bit in the newer films. But like, how do you feel about when this new, like, we're going to have a new Superman, and whoever it is, do you want it to be more like edgy, or would you prefer this kind of like, because your nostalgia of him is so sweet and such a good person, if you will.
It's not sweet. It's uncomplicated. It's like that Superman there was right and there was wrong, and there was good and there was bad. And I think that the effort, and it has been like over the last, since Alan Moore and like a ton of other people have taken on Superman in the comic books, there has been a movement towards that. But ultimately, at his core, Superman is what humans aspire to be at their best.
I don't think Superman works when you make him darker. I think every time they try to make Superman, I mean, you saw how people flipped out when he killed Zod in the Zack Snyder movie. I don't think it works to make him. I mean, They talk a lot about, and this is going to be controversial, and I don't want to get too much into it, but they do, in fact, especially in the movie with Brandon Routh.
Yeah.
They do talk about like Superman as a Christ-like figure, and I do think that Superman has that, a little bit of that veneer that he's, and this is why I say almost like a safer version of that for me is to say Santa Claus, because there's something about just like this he's a kind person, and he's so super powerful that he could kill anybody with like a, boom, and the person be dead, but he chooses not to do that. And he's also like about justice. Like you don't just kill somebody because you can, or you don't necessarily, you don't do the easy thing, it's all about treating everybody with an equal amount of fairness.
Doing the right thing.
Yeah, doing the right thing. Even when sometimes mercy is hard.
Although in the first couple seasons of this Superman,
well,
it's
so I was going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So when I went and I watched the pilot, I mean, the pilot's brutal.
Yeah.
From like a little kid standpoint.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever saw that when I was a little kid, but like it doesn't pull any punches. When he gets sent, I mean, everybody knows the story of Superman, but he gets sent off of Krypton, and his mother is crying her eyes out, and they're really going for it. They're acting, and when his parents find him,
I mean, they're still wearing these shiny 50s spacesuits, but they send him off on their way.
And when his newfound parents,
the
Kents find him, one of the last things that happen is his father dies, and it's kind of, there's a lot of sadness like in his origin. But I think that maybe the last time we see his mom too in the whole series. I don't think they didn't, Superman in general didn't, in the old days, didn't have a lot to do with his parents. In fact, if you watch the pilot of this, his parents have very different names.
Yeah.
It's Sarah and...
It's not,
Abram.
Abram, yeah.
It's not Abram, it's Ibram, I think. It's a weird... because that disturbed me so much that it wasn't Martha and Jonathan, that I actually looked up, and it's fascinating. So there's a book called Adventures of Superman. There was an actual novelization of Superman that apparently the series is technically based on, and it was Sarah and Ibram in the book.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Which is interesting. That's they actually didn't settle on the name of his parents until the comic book Superboy, which was like in 1958, I think, or in 59. It was only when the comic book Superboy became a big thing that they never dealt with his parents for more than just like a passing moment. And that's when they finally settled on Martha and Jonathan Kent.
Right.
And it wasn't even at first, like they had a couple different names for even when Superboy, until they finally were like, nope, this is it. This is how. And and then later years, they kept his parents alive. I don't know if in the current comic book that's the case, but in the 70s and 80s, his parents were both still alive in the comic books, and they made them radically younger. Because in the older books, they find him, and in the pilot, they find him, and they're old to start with. They're like in their upper. They always wanted kids but didn't have them, and they were past the point where you would have kids.
Again, you're getting to a biblical reference when you get to Abraham. And
But yeah, in the first season, Superman, I don't want to say kills people, but he certainly doesn't save people from dying who are bad guys.
So people suffer the consequences of their actions in that first in the first season, for sure.
And it is weird to see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to think that like the time we're coming straight out of World War II, and the kids who were born in the baby boomer generation just after, they're not quite old enough yet to be watching it's really kind of for I would say a more hardened audience.
In the second or third episode, there's a gangster, and they're on a cliff, and the gangster takes a swing at Superman, and Superman just does one of these, and the gangster then and falls right off the cliff, and Superman goes,
He just sort of looks,
and they never mentioned it again.
Yeah,
and it's very obvious that guy just fell to his death.
Yep.
And Superman did nothing to stop that.
It was the consequence of his own action. Yeah.
So there was a lot of that going on, and so this. Let's go back a little bit and talk about how the show happened. So, there was 2 film serials. One was Superman. The other one was Atom Man versus Superman.
Right.
And that was starring a completely different Superman. Let's see if we have a picture of him. His name is Kirk Alyn. And Alyn spelled Alyn. Yeah, there he is. And also you can see how cheap. Look at that S. That is a really trying to get out of the way there. That is a barely functioning S that they've got on there. And Lois was played by Noelle Neal. Who most of you probably think of when you think of Lois Lane. And we'll get to that. And let's see if we have a picture of the two of them together. I think we have a picture of Lois and, nope. Keep going with Kirk Alyn. Should be a Kirk Alyn Noelle Neal picture. We'll see if we have that. There we go. That's him as Clark Kent, and Noelle Neal, who just beautiful. Look at her there.
Yeah.
And so they did 2 serialized, and for those of you who don't know what that is, because
I mean, it's way before our time even.
These would be film serials that would play in front of a movie, and they would change every week. So it'd be almost like a TV show before, and these were before TV shows.
Right.
Serials were way before TV shows, and there would be a series of serials that would play before movies, usually movies that were designed for children.
Mm-hmm.
And you would watch the serials, and then you'd want to come back next week and see maybe even the same movie again.
Yeah, often
to see what the serials, because all the serials would change.
And there were a bunch. There did a Batman serial.
There were tons. Like a Flash Gordon. There was a bunch of Flash Gordon. There were 4 or 5 Flash Gordon series. Serials. So they did 2 serials, one in 1948 and one in 1950, and they were very, very popular. Kids went nuts over them.
Which also came off the back of, I mean, the real, was the Max Fleischer cartoons from the early 40s.
Sure.
Which I feel like these owe a lot to, in sort
of style. To a certain extent, although you know what by far was the biggest thing for Superman at this time?
What? Was
the radio show.
Right,
So Superman was created in 1938, I think.
Jerry Siegel, Joel Shuster, 1930. That's a good question.
I don't know if you even have that written down somewhere here.
While you look that up, this picture here...
1938, I was right.
Okay. This picture here is demonstrating back in the day, those receivers were so loud you could listen into a conversation that somebody was having.
Yes. Yeah, also, chunky phone there. Yeah, 1938 was when they created the comic. Comic book was huge, but then there was a radio show, and that radio show, in fact... Little bit of Superman trivia here. A lot of the things that we think of as Superman lore came from the radio show. In fact, probably the biggest one was Kryptonite. Kryptonite did not exist in the comic books, but when you're making a weekly radio show and you're trying to find some way for Superman to struggle, they're like, we got to come up with something to weaken him so that the villains every episode was just not just him. Hey, I'm Superman. Whack, you're done. Right. So Kryptonite was a part of that.
No, that's
cool. So that was a hugely popular show. The Superman radio show was just really big, millions of listeners.
And flying was a later innovation. He didn't originally because
that's hard to
But I thought I had, and maybe I'm wrong. Sure. But my memory is that flying was for the TV show.
It could be.
Yeah.
Well, or for the radio show, you mean?
Actually, for the TV show.
I don't think so. I think he was flying before.
Or for the serials, actually. But
it could be. I think he was flying in the radio show.
Okay.
There's some controversy as to when exactly Superman started to fly, because you're right. He leapt.
Yeah,
but I pretty quickly started to just make him fly.
In the Max Fleischer cartoons, he
flew in those, for sure.
he jumps a lot, especially, but then he really just starts to fly. Like, So, you're
and
right.
by the way, if you haven't
Then maybe
seen
that's the TV
those
show I was
Fleischer
thinking.
cartoons,
Oh,
they hold up.
they are among the most beautiful.
You can get them on I know you can get them on Blu-ray and DVD. I don't know if you can get them on DVD anymore, but
they're stunningly beautiful.
You probably can order them from like Apple or
I think
Amazon.
they're actually pretty tricky to get, but the Art Deco influenced animation is just it's among the most beautiful animation ever made,
for sure. Now, so off of all the success of all these various different things, RKO wanted to, which was a big studio back in those days, wanted to, mostly radio studio actually, that broke off into, I think one of their most famous movies was King Kong.
Yep.
They wanted to make a television show, and they weren't nuts over Kirk for some reason. They weren't sold on him. I don't. There are conflicting things that are said back and forth. In later interviews, he said that he turned it down, but they say no, that's not the case. We didn't go to him. But they turned to George Reeves, who was a fairly well-known actor at the time. He had done quite a few films.
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind among them, yes. And was a fairly well-respected actor, kind of a B- level celebrity. He wasn't starring in a whole lot, but he was doing kind of a lot of what we would consider pulp schlocky films at the time.
Right.
But he was really handsome, and they really liked him, and so they had this idea of having a TV show without it being attached to a network. And only a couple other places had tried this beforehand. And this was one of the very first, what you call a first-run syndicated television show, where it was actually shot without a network to place it on, with them figuring that they would find places for it.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It was one of the very, very first ones, and it was a big gamble, because that wasn't the norm at all, especially for television. They had a couple shows that had gone into reruns at that point, that they were re-showing them, but even reruns was not the norm at that time. So
few people had TVs. Like, it was still a new technology. Like,
so they threw together in 1951. They threw together a pilot, really a film, a film where it was called, I believe it was called Superman versus the Moment.
Yes.
And it was an hour long, and it was okay, but it was good enough for the money people to go, okay, we're gonna try this whole first run syndication thing. And I believe they taped, I think they taped all 22. They taped 22, and then with the pilot, they could split that in half and do another 2 episodes.
Yeah, Superman the Mole is the one that I was talking about before. It's the one in black and white.
So we have a picture of the Mole Man.
Yeah, haunts me to this day.
Real quick, I think one of those guys just said, "Hey, what gives?" I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he fought a lot of gangsters in the first season.
Yeah.
Look
at these guys. Terrifying.
So can I tell you who this guy is here?
Yeah.
You'll recognize him. So you were saying that you thought these were children. These are not children.
It was so hard to tell.
And we don't use this term. This is not a derogatory term. This is the actual term for people, but they don't exist anymore. So he was a midget. He was a person who was born without a growth hormone that you now just give artificially. There's no such thing as a midget anymore. But this guy is mostly famous for being, we represent the Lollipop Guild.
Right.
That's the Lollipop Guild guy.
Wow.
From The Wizard of Oz. I believe all three of these. In fact, if you look at all three of them, you can find all three of them in the Wizard of Oz.
In the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was an entire part of town that the little people from the Wizard of Oz lived in. Los Angeles.
It's a fascinating
it's a fascinating story.
Story behind all that. But nowadays, people who because that is a different thing than I don't know what you exactly you call it. Well, dwarfism is a different thing than this is what I'm saying. I don't know what the technical term for midgetism is, but it's just a lack of a growth hormone, and that's
probably
something.
Not midgetism.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to be derogatory about it.
Of course, yeah.
But it nowadays it's a thing that you would just get a shot. You'd give the child a shot, and they would get an artificial growth hormone, and then there you go. You just that's fixed.
As a kid, and even watching it again, I was so confused by whether these were children or whether or children with weird head things that didn't quite fit, which made it even weirder and creepier and like the whole thing and their eyebrows and the way they crawled out of so the premise of the episode is that some oil drillers are digging, because LA was also a big oil at the time, especially was huge oil fields, and they were digging down, which they shot. Sorry,
this was everything was shot in Los Angeles.
The first thing I grew up in Los Angeles, and the first thing I knew about LA's City Hall was that it was the Daily Planet from Superman, because
in fact, if you watch the pilot, they have the observatory.
Right, Griffith Park Observatory is Krypton.
Is Krypton.
Which is amazing, and it's
weird to
super.
see. It's also weird to see how little Griffith Park Observatory has changed.
It's very much the same. But they did. So the oil drillers are drilling down into the center of the earth, and they just hit this area where there's nothing. They're not drilling anymore. It's open space, and then these guys crawl up and accidentally cause some havoc, and then the townspeople chase them. And again, this is where we get into Superman, like being the best of us, because he is defending these freaky looking mole men from the townsfolk who were the sort of the what would be considered the good upstanding townsfolk who were overwhelmed by their fear of the other and who were hunting these guys down. And Superman really defended them. He and then in turn defended when they tried to get back at the townspeople, defended the townspeople, saying no, you're not going to kill these guys even though they tried to kill you. But anyway, this episode in particular haunted me for years. I had nightmares about these creepy people crawling up out of anything in my backyard or anything like that.
So, how long do you think it took them to film 22 episodes?
I can't imagine it would take a very long time the way they shot stuff in the past. I'm going to say 3 months, 4 months.
2 months.
2 months. Wow.
2 months. And they shot it in a style where they would take 5 episodes at a time, and they would okay, here's everything that takes place in Perry White's office.
Right.
And so we're going to film all those back to back to back to back.
Sure.
With them knowing that's why Clark Kent wears the same suit for almost the entire first season.
Right.
Yeah, and even by yesteryear's standards, this was a really, really fly-by-night cheap shoot.
Yeah,
they got paid the fella Jack who plays Jack. Plays
Jimmy Olsen.
Jack Larson.
Jack
Larson talks about it being a couple $100 a week kind of thing, just being very, very, very.
Well, I hope they did very
money.
well in syndication, because for a long time it played all the time.
Yeah, and if the syndicated if residuals were
not
the way
at
they
the
were,
time. Yes,
yeah.
So probably
no, they didn't make a ton of film.
No.
So they knocked those out, but of course they had no place to air, and so they discontinued production, and then everybody went their own way and forgot about it completely. The show didn't air until a year later, 1952. And they found a deal. I believe it was with ABC. It was when Kellogg decided to sponsor them.
Okay.
So Kellogg sponsored them, and I believe it was ABC, but I may be wrong about that. And because I believe ABC is where it was for a few years in the years after that. But Kellogg had agreed to be a sponsor, and then they just put him on the air. So Jack Larson, who we were talking about before, he talks about being in New York and all of a sudden being mobbed by kids and him not knowing why. And him go, what is going on here? Because nobody told the actors, oh, by the way, we're putting it on television.
Right.
And it was on at a time that was not the normal time that adults would be watching television.
Sure.
So the actors had no idea why all of a sudden they were like, I mean, getting mobbed. They would go out to shop, and kids would see them and scream and run over to them, and and because it became instantly a huge hit. Like kids went absolutely bananas for it. And we talked a little bit about Noel Neal. The first season did not have Noel Neal on it. It had the woman that was cast, and that's Phyllis Coates.
Phyllis Coates, yeah.
Who did a wonderful job on it.
Yeah, she's great.
And
different. Very
different.
Very different.
Very different. And she was very good had a very good working relationship with George Reeves, to the point that they became extremely good friends when they created when they did the original hour-long Mole Men project.
Oh, right, okay.
And when it got picked up and when it became a television show, George Reeves insisted that Phyllis Coates share his title card, which was very unusual back in the day. For a leading man because the leading men almost always had their own title card.
Sure.
And if you look at the first season, and this, by the way, was she was only on one season, and then she actually, because there was a year between that, she would have loved to have come back, but she was doing other things.
Right.
So they weren't able to get her back, and she was kind of bummed about that. Like, she really enjoyed the experience. But she had other projects, so they brought Noel Neal back that had become kind of a famous Lois from the serials.
Right.
But Noel Neal didn't share that title card because he had no relationship with her at all.
Right.
And so he went back to a single title card. But when she was on that show for the first season, he shared a title card with her. Right. And I cannot stress to you how big a deal that was in Hollywood back in those days, and how they must have had like a really good relationship for him to insist on.
Yeah,
because he really saw it as a partnership.
It would be a big deal now. Yeah, So yeah, Phyllis Coates
she went out the season, and then Noel Neal came in, and there you can see we had a picture flashed up before that becomes the classic. So that's Phyllis Coates again.
Yep.
I think somewhere there we have George Reeves, and or maybe we don't. I don't know. We'll keep going through and see if we have any of them. I don't know if I had. There was one picture that I think we lost somewhere here.
Yeah,
that was a group photo, and I think we may have lost that group photo. We do have him with Jack Larson. I think we have. Yeah. Oop.
There we go. Yeah,
so
Jimmy Olsen.
Jimmy Olsen. And Jack Larson, by the way, became a huge fan favorite.
Yeah.
I think the kids
saw themselves
identified
exactly.
with him.
He was all of us.
And he had kind of the quality Burt Ward had, in that it didn't matter how old he got, he still kind of seemed like a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Burt Ward, I met him in person, and he still seemed like he was kind of a kid.
Right.
And Jack Larson had that same
Burt
kind of...
Ward, who was Robin.
Which was Robin
Batman
in
TV
Batman.
Show.
Yeah. And Jack Larson, I think, had that quality where he just came across as very likable and in fact, in the first season, he was the one being saved way more than Lois.
Yeah.
Like Lois was usually the smart one. And he was like always finding himself locked in a safe, or like all these things, and he was constantly in danger of doing something goofy or dumb.
You could really see that the guy who played him in the Christopher Reeve Superman's really patterned himself after. It was that same
Sure,
kind of
that same outfit. Yeah.
and just bumbling kind of, oh gee, Mister,
Right.
Absolutely.
Although I will say the biggest difference between the George Reeves and Christopher Reeve take on Superman is there is practically no difference between George Reeves as Superman and Clark Kent.
Yeah.
Like none. It's just glasses and a suit, and he talks in the exact same fashion, stands in the same way, has that same smirk. There is zero difference between the two of them.
And he keeps saying, well, when I say, I mean, Superman saved,
How did you get there so fast, Superman? I don't know. I guess maybe I flew there.
Right.
It to the point where it's like, like, are you even trying to keep this as a secret?
Right.
I mean, it is so heavy-handed, especially the first season. That is pretty funny. So after two seasons,
it is also interesting that like in the beginning of the show when they say, because he's Superman who is disguised as Clark Kent. And that's always been the big thing about Superman is that Superman's secret identity, or like Superman is Superman. He's not pretending to be Superman. He's pretending to be Clark Kent.
And although the some takes on the Superman, especially in Superman and Lois, it was claimed the other way around that I'm Clark Kent and I put on Superman. But yeah, I like it a little bit better with the other way around.
Yeah.
But yeah. So they did 2 seasons, brought everybody back, everybody but Phyllis Coates. They couldn't get her back. And they did a second season. And after that, they went to color. However, did you know that there was no color television when they did that?
I don't think I did know that. No.
So they went to color with the anticipation that someday color television might catch on, but there wasn't a single color television when they started filming this. But color television was something that they knew was on the horizon.
Right.
And so they, along with, there are only a few companies that did this. Disney with the Wild World of Disney.
Mm-hmm.
He started shooting in color way before they had the ability because they figured, well, someday there might be enough color TVs out there to start broadcasting this in color. Do you know how long it took?
How long?
1970s
was when
they started broadcasting them in color.
Wow.
Because that was the point where there were enough televisions that were color televisions. So they shot these in the 1950s.
Right.
And it was 20 years later before anybody saw them in color.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's why I was able to see them in the 80s, because they weren't broadcasting stuff in black and white, except for Twilight Zone.
I think that's one of the reasons why in the 70s and 80s, kids got so turned on to Superman because there was color Superman out there. And I don't think if they had shot those in black and white that it would have become as big in the 70s and 80s in syndication as it did.
No, definitely not.
So, but isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Think that,
it sounds like they were incredibly innovative. With shooting syndicated TV, which is, it's the model now that many shows are done was without a network. In fact, probably.
Especially so they had a few of them. The big, do you know what the biggest, most expensive one that happened that like opened up the syndication craze?
No.
It was Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Star Trek: The Next Generation, was $1 million an episode. And it was, again, considered like the most crazy gamble because it was not only was it the most syndicated television show ever made, it was the most expensive television show ever made when it was first went into production. And again, without a net, just in syndication. And it was a huge hit. And so that started the 80s craze of syndicated television, which brought us a bunch of different stuff. But again, first run syndication, perfect example of this is Baywatch. Baywatch started out on a network, didn't do so great on a network, then came back and did a syndicated version of Baywatch that became one of the biggest shows in the world.
Right.
But that wasn't first run syndication. First run syndication is, nope, we have conceived this show as a syndicated show without any network backing.
Right.
So it's quite a gamble to do that. And you're right, they do that quite a bit now.
Yeah.
Especially with cartoons and stuff. Well, they did now. Cartoons.
It's all everything's changed. But
everything's changed. A lot of these rules don't apply at all anymore. But
I wonder about I Love Lucy. Because that
So
was
I Love
that was
Lucy-
Desilu Studios.
yeah, but that was not. That was a second. That was after the fact. Syndication.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Almost everything that we know, the Honeymooners, all that
Right.
stuff back in the day that we know
for a particular
that was
channel.
that had a home before it started.
Cool. I just because Lucy was on.
Sure.
What was the joke, or not joke, but they said that for years and years that at any given moment in any days, I Love Lucy was playing
Sure.
somewhere in the world
Yeah.
before cable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I again, this isn't something that I did my research. I think that Superman got picked up by ABC for a while there, and its home was there, and it went through a period where it wasn't syndicated somewhere in there, but I don't know that for a fact. So it did 4 more seasons in color.
Okay.
It
Got much more kid friendly,
and
silly.
After the second
Yeah.
season, George Reeves had a real, I guess, conscience, what do you call
Crisis of
conscience?
Yeah.
Yes, that he just realized how many children were looking up to him and seeing him as a role model, and also believed Superman was absolutely real.
Right.
In fact, there's a very famous story that if you watch the movie Hollywoodland,
yeah.
they depict that, where he was at an event and a little kid came up to him with a gun that he had gotten from his father's night table and wanted to have Superman show how he could bounce a bullet off his chest. And
yeah.
George Reeves, being the unbelievable human being he was, quite frankly, did not freak out with the kid at all, and just told him basically that he could do that, but he doesn't want the bullet to bounce off and hurt somebody else. So could he please give him the gun? Didn't flinch, didn't freak out at the kid, and got the gun away from the child. And
pretty cool.
Yeah. He was a really, everybody who knew him. I mean, he had some other issues, but everybody who knew him, he was unbelievably kind to children in particular, but his fandom,
right?
And the problem is he was and I think there are other actors out there that you could point at that would have similar. That we were just talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation. I think Brett Spiner, who played Data, experienced this as well, where he became so famous as Superman,
so associated with the role
that it kind of ruined his acting career. He was, we were just talking about Gone with the Wind, but Gone with the Wind was in 1939, well before this. But what was the other film? He was in 2 Best Pictures. Let me look it up real quick here. Was it From Here to Eternity?
Oh.
It was something along those lines. If I'm right, I'm going to be impressed by let's see here.
Look at that picture, though.
Yep, it was. Wow.
That's Kirk
It
Allen.
was. That's the Kirk Allen.
Yeah, that's Kirk Allen.
It was From Here to Eternity.
Here to
I don't
Eternity,
know
that's
how
right.
my brain knew that.
Yeah, well done.
So he had a fairly small role in From Here to Eternity,
And
which
Gone with the Wind, yeah.
which became again a Best Picture winner.
Right.
But during screenings, people would see him and they'd laugh and they'd shout Superman at the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And his role got reduced drastically from what it was in the film because of pre-screenings, and they had to remove the vast majority of his performance from the film,
which led to the curse. The story.
Well, yes.
And one of the things, one of many things that led to the.
Yeah, and however, the show remained extremely popular. They did start paying him a fairly good salary toward the end. They had planned for a 7th season, and then something happened. Now they say that George Reeves killed himself by shooting himself multiple times in the chest, and then somehow throwing the gun away and having no gun residue on his hands.
Hmm.
I don't think that's what happened. I think so. Most likely, do you know that actually?
There are lots of theories, but yeah.
Most likely, what happened is he just happened to have an affair with the fixer for, I believe it was MGM.
Yeah.
Who had mob ties.
Yeah.
And
with his wife.
Yes, he had an affair. He had an affair with the fixer, the guy who makes things go away for MGM.
Mm-hmm.
Had an affair with his wife, and they're pretty sure that he bumped him off, which was very sad. We never got a 7th season. Everybody was gearing up for that, and we never got that. But that aside,
it's one of the it's a Hollywood mystery that still people are.
It's one of the more famous ones, and I highly suggest the movie Hollywoodland.
Yeah.
If any of you are interested in because it goes through the story of how the show was like the production of the show, and it really
is pretty accurate.
And by the way, I think it is Ben Affleck's, if not his best, one of his best. It was the first time I watched a movie and went, "Oh, look, Ben Affleck can act."
Yeah.
Like, I was really impressed with him. He did a really, really, really good job in the film as George Reeves.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that film. And I highly recommend you check out Superman.
The Adventures of Superman.
Yeah, I mean,
I imagine today, like I tried to watch some of it with my kids, and they were a little, it was very slow, kind of silly for them,
right?
But they watched, like they stuck with it with me, and so like I don't know, I think it's great. It has a kind of simple, feel good. And of course, let's also say, like, it was a time when representation in television was, like there is zero.
It was a product of its time.
There is racism. There's all
especially against the Asian community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you have to watch out for that, and explain. We have a mixed race family, and so explaining stuff like that and talking, but. It was a product of his time, and despite those flaws related to that, it is still it was a wonderful.
World War II was still fresh in people's minds.
Yeah, I mean he was still fighting Nazi, like pseudo Nazis in
the Japanese to a certain extent.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean it's I too tried to have my son watch it with me, and it moved too slow for him.
Yeah.
It did. It moved too slow.
And honestly, it moves too slow for me at times.
Sure.
But
like, I mean, who knows? Back when I didn't have a whole lot of choices.
There were no other
right?
options. Yeah, absolutely.
So I was entranced by it, but it really did it did instill in me. I absolutely believe this television show created my love for superheroes. I think it made me reach out and buy comic books, and it certainly made me fall in love with Superman. And I also feel like I'm gonna, because I could get maudlin. I get a little teary eyed sometimes when I talk about Superman. Like I can't tell you like how big a deal Superman is for me emotionally. I don't know why, but I also think that it gave me a sense of right and wrong.
Yeah, a moral code that that really that there are some things that you do the right thing that when you can, like that's what you do, and then there's no choice, or there's.
It also made me kind of fall in love with
Noel Neal,
and the hair, the style of that age.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like whenever I see a stuff set in the 50s,
yeah, sure.
Like I find that a very attractive look, and Noel Neal was just blue. I had the biggest crush on her when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
So yeah. Unfortunately, everyone who has been a part of the show has passed away. Mm-hmm. The last remaining was Phyllis Coatsable.
Right.
Yeah. She and though I will say that all of them had a great relationship with the Superman IP, and every single one of them, including Phyllis Coates, was brought onto other television shows or movies. I believe Noelle Neal played Lois's mom, and I think
and Kirk Allen played her dad. I believe,
and I believe that Phyllis Coates also played Lois's mother on a television show, and I don't remember the name of which one it was, but and Jack Larson did a number of things where they brought him in, and they were they're very beloved, and they didn't have anything negative to say about the experience of being on the show, which is not always, you don't always get to say that.
Yeah.
With a lot of those actors. So
can I just say, I'm looking at the reflection of you and me in the cape of Superman, and I don't think I've ever felt cooler in my life.
I like that shot.
Absolutely.
I haven't taken it down because
no,
of
I
that.
love it. That's amazing. Yeah.
Would you? I'm a Christopher Reeve Superman. I mean, like the when he goes around the earth and turns back the time to save like that, to me is the biggest tearjerkery moment I've ever had in like a superhero film, I believe.
Sure. And by the way, he was fantastic. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if I was to get into the nitty gritty, and maybe if I included like the Superboy television show, which was okay, like, I don't know that I like each of the choices that they've had for Superman. Christopher Reeve was fantastic as Superman.
He's great.
I thought Brandon Routh did a decent job of it. It's what he was asked to do.
Yeah.
I haven't watched enough of the current Superman and Lois that just ended its run.
Right.
I know when he doesn't look like Superman to me, that particular actor, but I think if I watched more of it, maybe I'd feel differently. I thought that the Adventures of Lois and Clark, Dean Cain, I thought was great. He did a great job with it.
Nicolas Cage
for 5 seconds in The Flash.
Yeah.
And of course
Henry Cavill,
who may be the most handsome man on the face of the planet, and he did a great job. I don't love what they gave him to do as Superman. I guess I'm not a big fan of the arc that they gave him in the movies that he's been in, but that's not his fault.
Yeah, no. But you know what might be a fun other one of these to do is actually the Christopher Reeve Superman.
Sure.
Because those came out around the time that when we were still kids, and while the Adventures of Superman was really imprinted and was the first, I think, contact that you and I had with Superman, the Christopher Reeve Superman was pretty. The
only problem with the Christopher Reeves, and I think maybe you might even agree with me too in there, Brett, but I don't know, is that they made 4 of them, and they should have made 2.
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
The third and the fourth one are I mean, the fourth one is unwatchable,
and the third one has Richard Pryor. I know.
I wouldn't say that was a positive.
But when we were at the age when it would have had the most most imprint. Was 1 and 2 because they were shot at the same time and they came out very close together.
Richard Donner
Superman
was great,
and Christopher Reeve in those as
he was fantastic.
He was wonderful.
They gave him some really goofy, weird powers in there. I don't know where he got his kissing people to take away their memories and the cellophane S.
You're right.
Throwing thing. Like, I don't know where those came from.
Sure.
But the movies themselves, they hold up pretty well.
Yeah.
But the third and fourth one though. The fourth one in particular is a really fascinating story on how that happened. But that is a different show.
That's a different show.
Yeah.
But this was this show. And I'm really glad we got to talk about this. Me too. I love this Adventures of Superman.
And I could go on and talk about Superman for another 2 or 3 hours. I love Superman. I know a lot of like weird facts in my brain about Superman because he is like my favorite superhero.
Give me one.
What would you? There are all kinds of weird kryptonites. Did you know that
Yeah?
So not only is there a crypto super dog, but there is a super cat as well. Did you know that?
Oh, right. No, I don't think I did know there's a super cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Gold kryptonite from Superman 3. There's that one. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, we should let the nice people go though.
Sure.
So we can talk about it.
Supergirl might be an interesting one to talk about as well.
Helen Slater.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Movie that brought down an entire studio.
Right. Yes. That also is true.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Please like and subscribe
Hit
and
all the
ring
buttons,
that bell.
do all those
we
things.
don't always remember to say that.
Yeah. But we should.
And please join us next week when we will take on some other subject that we will talk in exhausting detail about and wax about nostalgia of a bygone era and the things that we love so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for putting up
with us also. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm Dan.
Oh,
You're
nope,
Travis.
Nope.
That's the lights.
Nope. It's over.
Goodbye. Wow.